Hello and welcome back to part two of the Conclusion Unknown podcast with myself, James Parfitt, and Craig Jones here again today. Good morning, Craig. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. I was very careful how I introduced myself this time, not
Why is
to
that,
get
mate?
made. Well, I said hello, James, or something last time, and you've been repeatedly making fun of me for the way that it sounded. So yeah, I'm being careful. How dare you mock me for the way that I sound and make words come out of my mouth?
Well, it was quite funny, I've got to be honest. It was,
It,
Craig,
it
it was.
was, yes. I take your point on what you were saying. I don't know why it sounded like that, but hey, it sounded like
Hello,
that.
Jones. But it was quite amusing. Right, anyway, cracking on. So last week we discussed the wonderful world of flat Earth, right? Which basically none of us really come to a conclusion. We didn't really care, it didn't really matter, and none of us was right. Yeah, pretty much. So now we're going to cover. You definitely was not right, miss. You wasn't right. So don't sit there saying you was. So now we're going to go into episode two. Now, episode two, we're going to discuss something that I find quite fascinating at the moment as well, right? Because it's something that could be seen as either a master publicity stroke or it could be seen as it really happened, right? So why don't you tell us a bit about what we're going to look at today?
Yeah, so today is all about the big conspiracy theory of is Paul McCartney from the Beatles. Did he die in a car accident and get replaced by someone that was basically the double image of him, or very close to looking like him, and
Yeah.
was maybe had some surgery or cosmetic bits to make them look like Paul McCartney, so that the Beatles kind of story could continue, I guess. So it's it's quite an interesting one.
Yeah, it is because apparently, so the story goes, right? So that if you haven't heard of this conspiracy before, and I know a couple of people who haven't, is by all accounts, Paul McCartney died in a car crash, right? That's what we're getting from this in 1966.
Correct, yeah.
And basically, he left Abbey Road Studio and then died in a car crash on Wednesday, November the 5th in 1966. That was it. So
Yeah,
basically, instead of them coming out saying, actually, Paul is dead, he died in a car crash, they replaced him with somebody called Billy Shears, or it was as well, who, now don't get me wrong, if it was a if it was a person, he looked exactly like him, right? So that was
yeah,
how the story goes. Now, as we know with conspiracy theories in general, they get taken out and blown up, and then before we know it, it's all gone wrong, right? And then next thing you know, it's all now. There was a couple of things that was said, wasn't there, before, and by all accounts, in song.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So there was at the time. So obviously, I've been looking into this a little bit before we started. So at the time of the actual crash, there was actually three kind of things that happened. So there was allegedly this crash that happened on the M1, I believe. Whether that's true or not, I do not know. But
Right.
that is meant to be a car crash that Paul McCartney was involved in, and
Yep.
apparently has been proven that he wasn't involved in it. Also, at the same time, he had a motorbike crash,
Yep.
which he was involved in. And also at a similar time point, someone had borrowed his car and then had a crash in that car, but Paul McCartney wasn't in the car at the time. The kind of Chinese whispers of all those stories had kind of merged into this fascination that Paul McCartney had died in this car crash and had been replaced. And that kind of, so I believe it all started with and this was a little bit after the Beatles had actually decided to part ways as well. So someone rang a radio station where the radio presenter was, it was an anonymous call, and basically stated that Paul McCartney was dead and it's this massive conspiracy going on about it. And then people started to look into everything a bit, Beatles related in terms of the album artwork, the songs, the lyrics in the songs. People started playing songs backwards to find hidden messages and all that kind of stuff. It just started this craze of trying to find evidence to support the fact that Paul McCartney had died.
Yes, and basically, there's one of the artworks on your screen. That is Lonely Hearts. Now, what the people have basically come out and said is in the Lonely Hearts album cover, which is one here, is that it's a funeral procession. It's a funeral procession. It's at the funeral, and basically that's why everybody's looking so glum. Obviously, Paul in the middle there with his mustache, who basically has, according to them, died. Right? And that was it. They were looking into his hand placement. They were looking into literally everything, right? So how he is, there was a patch on his arm as well that they were looking into. And basically they come out and everybody took it out of proportion, right? They did in general. And there was a lot of things that were compared to Paul McCartney in general. There was obviously this album cover to start off, which was Lonely Hearts Club Band, where they were saying it was at a funeral procession. But there was also the Abbey Road one as well, which I do have. So give me 2 seconds while I get that up as well. But what do you think of it? What do you think about it?
Well, going back to Sergeant Pepper's album, that funeral looking picture at the front of it, so they, it's actually kind of been proven. So the album, the actual photo shoot for that album cover, there was loads of different pictures shot of different variations. Paul McCartney was in different poses and different sides of the sort of famous four that were there. And it just so happens that particular picture was chosen mainly because they all agreed, whoever makes the decisions on the album cover, that was the best shot they took on the day. And I think it was as simple as that. You can see a picture and you can kind of start pulling detail out of it and going, oh, is that because of so and so? I mean, the patch on the arm, I think I actually wrote it down in my notes. So everyone was assuming that because it said OPD, that it meant officially pronounced dead. But in reality, it was actually stood for some police department.
Ontario,
kind of
wasn't it Ontario Police Department?
Something like that. It is correct. So you can pick anything out of it, and then moving on to the Abbey Road, the famous crossing that you see so many people now taking pictures of. It's like a tourist attraction. So you got John Lennon in the front. He was dressed all in white, which people were stating was like a preacher kind of look to him. Ringo Starr was behind him in like a black suit, which kind of looked like an undertaker. Then you had Paul McCartney in a normal suit, but interestingly had bare feet. There was nothing on his feet. Some fans picked out as well that he had a cigarette in his right hand, but he was left-handed. Nothing to do with the fact of the angle that the picture was taken from, that he would have to have it in his right hand to be able to see the cigarette, is my kind of take on it. And then finally you had George Harrison in the background dressed as a grave digger, apparently. And then there's one more final clue in that album artwork is the car itself in the background. That's got the license plate 28 IF, which people were then saying that if, and that's the key word there, if Paul McCartney was still alive, he would be 28 years old.
He would be, yes.
Yes. So that's the theory on those ones.
Yeah, it was. So basically, there was so, with Abbey Road as well, there was come out that apparently, we bury the dead with no shoes. So therefore, that's why he's got no shoes on. He's out of sync with everybody else as well. Everyone else is left foot forward. He's right foot forward. As you say, his cigarette's pointing down to the ground as well. The thing is with this, and this is what made me laugh, and it was a massive, I've got a funny feeling on this one, it was a massive publicity stunt. Now, I was just sitting back earlier on and thinking, we've discussed this briefly as well, about the fact that, the album sales went absolutely through the roof. There was people, as you've said to me, messing up albums to try and play them backwards to hear the words, right? Apparently, John Lennon can hear in one album that he is at the end saying, Paul is dead, I miss him, I miss him. Then the interesting thing about this as well is I found a film. Now, I never knew this film existed, so bear with me if I can try and get this all in the picture here as well. Now, we'll have a listen to this. The trailer's about 2 minutes, give or take, long here. So have a listen to this. And then this is called Paul McCartney Really Is Dead, The Last Testament of George Harrison. Right? So this is it here. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this.
My name is George Harrison. The Beatles were a worldwide phenomenon. Frenzied crowds greeted us everywhere. But there's much more to the story. It's been a terrible burden of guilt, being part of this great deception. Even though there were important reasons for it. Which I'll explain. For it was many years ago, in 1966, that my mates and I promised never to tell the story that I'm about to tell. But first of all, I want to say how much we all loved Paul, the real Paul McCartney.
Now am I dead? Now am I dead?
Okay, so that was the film that I found on IMDb. Basically, it says Paul McCartney Really Is Dead, the last testament of George Harrison. What do you think? Because it just seems a little bit far-fetched for me, and I'm a conspiracy theorist in general, but it just seems a little bit far-fetched that they would go to this extent to try and cover this up.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, isn't it? If someone comes out with this kind of theory, I guess, and there's money to be made off the back of it by just kind of getting your spoon out, stirring the pot a little bit, adding a little bit, of mystery kind of behind it. I think it would be worth mentioning as well. Like this isn't like necessarily the first conspiracy within the music industry about this. So I think someone mentioned it after the Flat Earth one about when they heard we were doing Paul McCartney, about Avril Lavigne as well. So very similar story with her. So she, was having allegedly some mental health issues, and was finding it difficult. And they had actually hired this Melissa Mandela, I believe her name was, who, if you look at Google, if you actually Google it, you can't tell the difference between them. They are exactly the same person. But she would stand in for Avril at these events that she couldn't handle. Unfortunately, apparently Avril Lavigne committed suicide. And then she was then asked to stand in full time and become a body double of Avril Lavigne. That's been going on for some time. And again, there's album artwork, there's song lyrics. Interestingly, with that one though, she started to dress slightly differently, and her autographs changed, her handwriting changed. There was lots of different bits and pieces. But again, it sold albums. It created that PR. It created that spotlight for them to sell their music.
Yeah.
And I think it's exactly the same with the Beatles. I think, you know, once this came out, either it was purposely done to sell records, or, you know, these fan theories had came out and they went, you know, the record label went, we can capitalize on this, and if we start stirring the pot a little bit and just giving little snippets of information and little facts in album artwork and in interviews, and you know, I think there's been some very carefully worded responses and interviews as well that you can find out on the internet when people have asked such questions, which just added a little bit of fuel to the fire, which just got people going, could this be, is there something, is there something in this? And it sold records. It done exactly what they wanted it to do.
I think that was the thing. And one of the main things that I've seen as well is, you know, people were picking out the differences between Paul before the reported death and Paul after the death. You know, there was things like ear shape, which I really could not tell the difference. So on the screen, let me just see if I can get this in, is some of the images that were perceived to be who they were. So I'll just leave that playing because it is just a video clip there as well. And some of the images of Paul and Fall, they're calling him, which is obviously what this initial Billy Shears thing was. And they were talking about the way his ear shape was, the way his jawline was gone from round to all of a sudden more pointed. You know, differences, here we go, head shape, lips and nose, right? From Paul before to Paul after. And as much as you want to sit there and be like, come on, like, this can't be real. It just can't be that people would go to the lengths. Now, this isn't the only one, though. As you said, there was Avril Lavigne as well. There was also Kanye West was another one, all at the same time. Apparently, Kanye died in a car crash. He come back and he looked completely different. Now, if you've seen the images of Kanye before the car crash and Kanye after the car crash, he went on a I want to eat food as much as possible diet, and he blew up and his face looked like a rounded thing. So regarding conspiracies within the music industry as such, they seem to be a natural thing. Now, obviously, there's got to be a time in an artist's life where he just turns around and says, I've had enough, right? And there's got to be a bunch of record companies there going, you can't have enough. Like Avril Lavigne, you can't have enough. Paul McCartney, you can't have enough. You know, all of these things. So I suppose in a way, it's like Elvis. There was one on Elvis as well. The old guy in Elvis who's come out and apparently Elvis isn't dead. This is him, his hands, his lips, his nose, his voice, everything about him is supposed to be Elvis Presley. Now, do you think that if you study a person long enough, you could take on their persona with the way that they hold themselves?
I don't think so. You are who you are, and you know, if you, I don't believe the Avril Lavigne one either. If I'm honest with you, I do find it interesting though how people notice differences in how each person wrote and like signed autographs and kind of. So you know, if you were, you know, imagine being that person where you get a phone call going, look, unfortunately, Paul McCartney's died. You look a bit like him or quite a lot like him. Are you doing anything for the next couple of years? Because, you know, we need you to become him because, you know, we want this, you know, we want that magic to continue and all that kind of stuff. You know, can you imagine just getting that phone call? You just, where would you even start?
I don't
with
know.
it? You know what I mean?
Mate,
like,
to be honest, I wouldn't know, but this is the thing.
Also, Paul McCartney, you know, but that doesn't bother.
You feel any kind of
found of this situation, and I'm just going to turn this down a bit as well because it's quite loud. But this is an interview with apparently Billy Shears or Shepherd admits he is also Paul McCartney. Okay, so just take a listen to this a minute.
You feel any kind of, I guess resentment is much too strong a word, but any kind of hesitation about the fact that you will always, in all probability, be identified as a former Beatle?
No, I don't mind it. I'm always going to be identified by my real name, also Paul McCartney. But that doesn't bother me. And ex-Beatles, another kind of tag, which doesn't bother me. I'm proud of what I'd done. I'm always going to be identified by my real name, also Paul McCartney. Also Paul McCartney.
There are two Paul McCartneys. There are two Paul McCartneys.
You feel any
So that was the interview with the Billy Shears, Paul McCartney. He basically comes out and says, I'm also going to be known by my real name, also Paul McCartney. Then there's a clip of Paul McCartney at the end saying there's two Paul McCartneys. Do you know what? As a conspiracy, I don't really think that this is possible. I don't really feel that this is something that could be all remotely true. I don't know. It just seems a little bit far fetched for me.
Yeah, I'm weirdly in agreement with you on this one. Yeah, it's just too far. Going back to kind of some of the stuff we've mentioned as well. So putting the album artwork aside, you mentioned stuff around Paul is dead. I miss him. I miss him. Yeah. When you, which I believe was I'm So Tired played backwards. It's the same again in Strawberry Fields Forever. So they reckon Lennon at the end, if you rewind it back, says I buried Paul.
Yep.
Now I don't know if you've ever seen the Peter Kay sketch where he's basically doing all these famous songs where he's misheard the lyrics or he's misinterpreted the lyrics. So he basically says, oh, listen to this song, it actually says this, and he kind of plays the song into a microphone and people are laughing because it sounds really, really funny to all these songs. And it's one of those things, if you say that the words say something, when you listen to it, that's what you're going to hear. So in this particular case, they say I buried Paul, but actually what he would say would be at the very end. I don't think this one is played backwards, but he says cranberry sauce.
Yeah,
it's like completely different to what people were interpreting because they were looking for it. And when you look for something, you create that in your mind, and that's what you actually hear when you play it back. And I think that's just what it is. And like I said, I just think it's really clever. PR stunt that's gone really, really well for them. I mean, what now? Like, how many years on are we still talking? 50 odd, 60 years on, we are still here. We are creating a podcast, and we're still talking about it because people still bring it up and people still mention it. It's still relevant to today, and clearly there's evidence to support that other artists since have gone, that was a really good stunt. Let's, what could we manifest and create ourselves?
That's it. Is it capitalizing on the whole death thing? Because even with MJ, Michael Jackson, there was, is he dead? Isn't he dead? There was a film of somebody who apparently shot a video at the hospital where apparently he was pronounced dead, and MJ just gets out and walks into the hospital, and you're like, hold on, don't get me wrong, you don't know, but that video that just played there as well about it being in the interview, the comments on that video are literally insane. People telling them to go and check out the Last Testament of Paul, the bit of the film that we said by George Harrison. If you want to know whether or not he is or not, you want to go and check this out, and you want to. It's really difficult, isn't it? Because you could understand why they would do it. The Beatles were one of the biggest recording acts at the time. They were the Fab Four. There was, women going absolutely mental. Would they have had the same pull if they were no pun intended there, but if they were the Fab Three? Would it have made the same thing?
But again, we've had artists and stuff that have, you know, they've had deaths within the bands. They've had, you know, people walk out, and they've continued to go on. You know, I don't think if Paul had died, or even if Paul had left, then we still, you know, would we still have a Beatles? Absolutely, we still would have a Beatles. And again today, it's still, you know, they're still releasing, you know, albums and remastering albums and bits and pieces like that. So I understand, you know, I've worked in the music industry to a certain degree before, and I understand a lot of it is down to backers and investors, and it's money what makes it work. Unfortunately, as we know with a lot of things, it's not always talent that drives this. It's whether you've got
just got to look at X Factor, ain't you, and everything else.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
it all comes down to money. So you know, an individual artist like someone like Avril Lavigne, you know, if she's dead, then Avril Lavigne finishes, gone. You know, so you know, if someone's got millions of pounds invested into that particular person, and they can, you know, they can spend that money on getting someone that looks exactly the same as them and pretend that it's them.
Yep.
It secures their investment. So you know, you can definitely see where these kind of crazy theories come from, but whether it makes it true or not, I'm not so sure. I don't think you can become someone. I mean, who would replace you?
Me?
Colonel
baby.
Sanders. Nah, Colonel Sanders maybe.
You reckon?
Obviously,
KFC.
For me, it would be Jason Statham.
For me, according to Jason Haddington, it would be a blinking homeless man.
It would be,
You know what I mean?
yes.
According to Jace Haddington, you know, you debated with a homeless man last night. So, you know, clearly I'm not homeless, Jace, but thanks very much for that one. Much love to that as well. And this is the thing with this situation. You know, I'm going to try and get this cover into the screen here as well that said, Paul is still with us. The case of the missing Beatle, apparently, and he's there, Paul and his family, last week in Scotland. For me, on this one, I think it's really difficult to believe. Now, obviously, I wasn't around, believe it or not, in that time when he was died. You know, apparently he died in the year that England won the World Cup. I wasn't around at that point, so I don't know, you know, the whole beginning as such of this. We've only gone and obviously read what we've read and researched what we've researched. And, you know, I know you did a chat GTP thing as well, wasn't it? And that was a very in-depth introduction into the Paul McCartney saga as such as well. And yes, you're right. I think people, if they have millions invested into people, you can see why they would go and look at replacing them. That's without a shadow of a doubt. You know what I mean? They need their money back. They're not going to put 20 million into Avril Lavigne and then let her, you know, go and top herself as such with suicide and then basically not want their money back. They've got to get their money back somehow, right? And I can understand why that would be a thing. Now, whether or not I believe that thing, I just think it's
a big ask, and it's, you know, how can you be that, you know, Paul McCartney, you know, they were the biggest band to have ever walked the earth, and like I said, just imagine getting that phone call to say, that's who has the mental capacity to deal with that so quickly and become that person and, you know, learn everything and know everything. You know, there was allegedly the other Beatles taught him how, you know, taught him how to sing. Yeah, my coma brain coming out. And just, it's just too much. Yeah, I don't think anybody has the mental capacity to kind of deal with that so quickly. And you know, there's always going to be people out there. You know, I believe that, I don't know if this is true, but I'm sure I read something about like this. It was Billy Shears, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I believe that, you know, there was a contest held about lookalikes for the Beatles or something just before all this came out. Coincidence? I don't know. But I think we spoke about it before. We've even talked about potentially doing an episode on it about celebrities today, that where there's pictures of people years and years ago, like hundreds of years ago in the past, which look exactly the same as the celebrities we have today. And we were talking, statistically, and there's so many people being born every day. The global population is growing. You're always going to find people that look very similar to other people.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, when I was going back to Avril Lavigne, when I was a teenager, Avril Lavigne was probably at her peak. And I used to come home from school and I used to put Kerrang on the TV, and there she was doing her music videos and stuff like that. I think I would be able to tell the difference from one person looking like that to if someone else replaced her. But I would urge anyone listening just to go and have a look on Google, because this Melissa,
what is her name?
Girl, that Melissa Mandela, they are extremely similar. I mean, it's really hard to actually tell the difference. Maybe the nose is slightly different on there, but yeah, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But people can look very differently. Going back to your point before, very, very quickly, and like I said, I try to base everything that I make a decision on any experience I've had personally. Without getting into it, I've had a recent experience where, well, let's just say I had a very long sleep for a few days, and what people were telling me was I looked completely different. And my point is just to say that's a matter of days where someone can physically, their features in their face and how they look can change. So you saying about a crazy I love food diet and stuff like that will have an effect very quickly on how somebody looks in the face.
Yeah. The picture of Avril Lavigne and this Melissa Mandela is on the screen there as well, so you can have a look at the similarities that apparently is taking place. The chances of somebody ever coming out and looking exactly the same as somebody, as you say, in the modern population, the fact that we've got ludicrous amounts of people on the earth now there's a very high chance that somebody out there, don't get me wrong, if anybody wants to come out and look as good looking as me, well, you can go for it, can't you? You know what I mean? Hey, I don't look too bad, mate, with my beard and my homeless face. You know what I mean, Chase? So, what are we going to do with this one then? Do we think that we're going to put this in the conclusion unknown, I don't believe bin? Or are we going to put it in the conclusion unknown, it's possible? What do we think on this one?
Well, as we've repeatedly said, we can never prove anything on this podcast.
No,
we can't prove it. We can't disprove it. We can't. Could it be possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. I really don't think it's one that I believe or one that I subscribe to. I think it's an interesting one, and I like the kind of the business mind behind it and the PR stunt and all that. I think it's very, very clever, but I think that's all it is.
You reckon that's all it is, a business stunt, PR? Okay. Well, yeah. I kind of have to agree with you, and I don't like agreeing with you because
I know it hurts, doesn't it?
It does hurt, and
it's painful. Yeah.
Yeah. This one I can't get behind. I think that it just wouldn't be possible. It takes you down a different dimensional road of cloning, and we can see amounts of effects that come out by this as well, and you could go down a tunnel forever, couldn't you, on that one? But I think for me, as much as I'd love to sit back and go, yes, this is it, Paul McCartney isn't dead, I just find it ludicrous. I think they've come out and they've done a PR stunt. I think they've announced these people of whatever and leaked little bits and set little tidbits involved with it and all that, but I cannot see. I'm sorry on
that. And if they were to do it, Why do they have to go and make things so complicated?
Nice.
I had to say that.
Yeah, I bet you
I
did.
just had to say that. Yeah.
If anybody doesn't know what that is, go listen to an Avril Lavigne song there as well. Because, you know, Craig can just be your skater boy. You know what I mean? The man that you want there as well.
Good try.
Yeah, I think this is basically this one was quite short and sweet, really, wasn't it? In conjunction with what we were talking about last week. Where are we going to go next week? Where are we going? Now we've had people come out, and we've had Mandela Effect, where Robert Stoughton wants to join us for the Mandela Effect. We've had 9/11, where Morgan Butler wants to come on and talk about 9/11. Where space did we land? Did we land in our little paper mache rocket that we clearly didn't get to space at all? But anyway, listen, there's that one. Was Stanley Kubrick involved in it? Absolutely. Stanley Kubrick's best film was the moon landing. So where are we going to go? What are we going to do next week?
I quite fancy the Mandela Effect, to be honest with you.
Do you?
I love talking about that. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get hold of Robert Stoughton and have a chat with him about seeing if he can come on next Monday, and we'll do the Mandela Effect and discuss about the did we or did we not switch timelines when the Hadron Collider sparked up for the first time. That's really where it kicked off. Also, as well, let us know in the comment section, do you remember when Nelson Mandela died? Now, for me, it was 1985. But for everybody else, apparently it's 2013. So I'm quite freaked out by that. Also, in the film Risky Business, did Tom Cruise wear sunglasses when he come in sliding on his socks? Or did he not have sunglasses on? Now, for me, he did have sunglasses on. But apparently now he doesn't have sunglasses on, which is quite freaky here as well. But that's going to wrap it up today, guys. Thank you so much for listening to me and Craig just completely waffle on about things that we can't prove or disprove there as well. So we will catch up with you again next week. That's going to round out episode 2 of the Conclusion Unknown podcast. And, well, as always, unknown, take care.